Prince Shooting Star, Twilight Sparkle, True Love by Switched Up. For the past 300 years, Shooting Star was a prince. He was born into two unicorn and Pegasi parents in a small part of northern Equestria. His parents was very happy to have an alicorn son, even they were a small king and queen in a small kingdom. And one day they wanted to have their son to take over the kingdom. And he was actually not looking forward to see more of Equestria than rather than rule a kingdom. But just then, when he's about 18 years old, when he's of the legal age to take over from his father, he said to his father, "I'm not sorry, father, but I don't want to be a ruler. I want to explore. I want to see more of this land rather than a government and a small kingdom." But his father said almost the same thing. "Since you are my son, you have the opportunity to take care of one small kingdom that has been in our family for generations. Your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-great-great-grandfather had ruled the same land as they before them. And now it is turned to you. I am stepping down to be so you can take over, so one day your son. But Dad, how do you want if I have a daughter instead?" "Well, you will continue to have it until you have a son." And his father and Shooting Star could not even stop arguing about this. They kept for days, weeks, months, even about this, until one day he said to his father, "Father, I'm stepping down as a king of this kingdom." And his parents was just shocked. "What did you say?" said his father. "How dare you? You have been chosen to be a king, and you're stepping down after a couple of months? How dare you? Your family have been on this throne for generations, and now you're stepping down?" "Yes, father, I don't want to be a king. I just want to be a regular unicorn, a regular pony to experience things for myself and to not have to be taking orders to others or give orders. I want to love other ponies as my own, not as a ruler." But his father did not accept that his son was going to step down as a king. Even then he was forced to be a king for the next couple of months. But Shooting Star, he had something in plan. Sometimes during his time as a king, he still focused on his study on magic. Some of us are very advanced magic spells that is included with teleportations, shields, or even transformation spells. And he is the only alicorn born in the family. Mostly are either unicorn. All there has been a unicorn in the family line from the father's side. But he was the first alicorn, but he didn't matter for that. What his father didn't know, and his mother said too, that every time he studied his magic, he was planning for an escape. For months he planned this, but he had to wait for the right moment. He wanted to take care of this, to escape from his kingdom middle of the night, because he couldn't do it in the middle of the day, because then he had all the royal guards would find him actually quicker. Since most of the royal guards were either asleep during the night, so he had to take the right opportunity to do it. And one morning, he had planned every detail. That night he was going to make it. But then, all his plans failed because of that his father had to stay with him all the night because he wanted to talk to his son about a treaty, because a treaty between his own son and as the neighbor village. He wanted to stop to talk about this treaty, but his father would not accept any interruptions at all. So Shooting Star had to pretend that he was focused on the treaty, but rather focus on his escape. So then he couldn't escape that night, but he was planning for the next one. And then he did. Next night, when his parents were still deep asleep, there were no other guards except only one in the hallway outside his room. He wrote a letter to his parents. He wrote, "Dear Mom and Dad, when you read this letter, it means that I am gone. I am stepping down as prince and king of this kingdom. Even if you find me, I will never return back. Will never be the king you wanted me to be, Father. I wanted to be something else rather than a rolling pony. Your son, former prince, Shooting Star." Then he took a cloak and used all his magic he had and teleported him far away from the castle, maybe like almost 20 kilometers away from the castle. Even then, he was still not far away from the castle. He used his teleportation spell at least 3 more times, just in case it had to be that. But then, he was safe enough. Then he started walking around. The next morning, when his parents found the letter, they immediately started to give orders to the guards and the people in town to search for his son. And the search went for days, weeks, months, but no pony found. And the reason why he still never could find him is because that Shooting Star used a very much spell, transformation spell. Prince Shooting Star used the transformation spells that he had been learning himself and transformed himself into a grey unicorn, so no pony else could know that was him. So for the next few months after, Shooting Star used an alias or a different name. He called himself just Shooting or Silver Star for most. No other pony even realized that he was a prince from a small kingdom in the north. Even Shooting Star just didn't want to talk about it. If any pony asked where he was from, he said that he's from the south, that he is for traveling around, that he is a nomad or just a traveler. But for the next a few hundred years afterwards, Shooting Star has been traveled around Equestria, Saudi Arabia, and Griffithstone back and forward over the years. But he wanted now to settle down. But exactly where, he had no idea. So one day when he arrived at a small town called Ponyville, he didn't know much about the city and the town because he has never been there. Well, technically he was there a few times before, but that was long before the town was even built or even Pony lived there. So he didn't know exactly about it then. Even he was still as dressed as a Pegasi by the same colors over the last several hundred years. He has still had worked as local stores and other places around Equestria and earned some bits. He even didn't use much of his money because He often lived in the wild by himself or traveling around, but this time he wanted to settle down. But now at first he didn't know exactly where to stay. He stayed first in Manhattan, but nothing. It was too crowded. So then he moved to Trottingham, same thing there. Then in Philadelphia, but nothing. So he decided maybe Saudi Arabia, but no. Even those people, the opponents there was very kindful, but he wanted to be something where can feel whole, connected. But then he's decided to stay in Ponyville just for a few days to see if there's something else, somewhere else. But then he met her, Princess Twilight Sparkle. When he saw her, he was very much hypnotized by her beauty. But he didn't know that her name and it was a new Princess Alicorn. So he asked some of the locals to see who it was, and they often ask him, "Have you never even heard about Princess Twilight?" No, I haven't. I have been traveling around so much. I didn't spend so much time to listen to news around the question. I traveling around so much. I didn't pay enough attention to it. Oh, well, she's the recently became princess since she has been a personal student of Princess Celestia for a number of years. She lives here now in her own castle. So you mean that big crystal building is her castle? Yeah, that's correct, said one of the posters she asked. Shooting Star then didn't know much about her, so he started looking around the pony town to ask a few ponies or even ask some of her friends about her. One of them were actually Rarity, who started to get a little bit curious why he asked her so much about her. And then he explained the reason that he had never even heard about her before until today. And at first Rarity didn't know exactly if he was telling the truth or even believe him. But she could sense that there was something special about him. Even he was still as a Pegasi. But he even asked Rarity if it was possible maybe so that he could meet her, just to be her friend at least. And Rarity said that he could follow with her to the castle tomorrow. And he said, "Okay, I will wait here outside at your boutique then." So the next day, both of them went to the castle, and Spike opened the door. "Oh, Rarity! Oh, who is he?" "Oh, this is Silver Star. He's actually a friend of mine. He recently moved here." "Oh, oh, he want to meet Twilight." "Oh, well, she's in library studying some magic right now, but yeah, sure, come in." Rarity went follow with Spike and Silver or Shooting Star into the library when he saw her practice on the magic with Starlight. But then they stopped the practice after it has been practiced for almost 5 hours without a break, which they thought was exhausting. A little bit later, Twilight talked with Shooting Star and Rarity and Spike a little bit what's happening in town then, and Shooting Star started to feel a little bit more comfortable and feel warm. He has never felt this kind before. He never thought that Twilight might be the right mare for him, or even at least settle down with. So after that, Rarity and Spike went on their date. Shooting Star remained in the castle with Twilight to study in the library. Then he saw a spell book. "Oh, have you studied this book?" "Yeah, I only say Starlight, but some spells are even a little bit complicated. I don't know how to do to make it. Well, that spell is kind of difficult to learn. That is, can I say? Because well, kind of learned it myself years ago. Wait, you learned the spell, but how? You're a Pegasi. Well, in fact, no. I'm not a Pegasi. I'm actually. And then he used the same spell and turned back to his old self. You're an alicorn? But how? But where are you from? And Shooting Star explained everything to Twilight, who he was and where he's from. And Twilight was overwhelmed of that information, especially that she had never heard about a male alicorn before. And especially the only alicorn she knows that has been born naturally was her niece, Very Heart. But Shooting Star explained to her that he was the only known male alicorn, even to his family, and he has never been home for the last several hundred years, and he will never going back because he was never want to be a king in that small kingdom. Then he said to Twilight that he kind of fell in love with her, but he said that he understand that she might even feel the same thing for him since they had just met. And Twilight was still much stunned about this. She didn't speak much. Then Shooting Star felt he didn't want to stay there anymore, so he said goodbye and just left. He went back to the hotel but before that, he turned back to his Pegasi form, so no other opponent would realize that he was an alicorn. He didn't want to pay it to draw much attention about it. But at the local hotel where he stayed, there he was his old self. But just before he always went back out, he turned back to his Pegasi form. But next day, he decided to leave. Maybe perhaps that Ponyville was not the right place to live. But just before then, he heard a knock on the door, and he opened. It was Twilight. He was stunned to see her there, and she explained that if he can come in and talk. And he let her in, and they started to talk about this. She even said to him that she had asked Celestia and Luna about this, if they even know about a male alicorn. But they both had said back that they didn't know exactly nothing about a male alicorn, but they know about that small kingdom in the north. But they didn't know that the former royal couple for centuries ago they had an alicorn son. The reason why they didn't know about it is because they had to make sure that any other opponents told about their son to others, because they didn't want to pay too much attention about it, or at least to draw so much attention to some possible future enemies. But now that since that kingdom has been gone for centuries now, it's just wasteland up there now. And even then, Twilight said to him that she might even want to try to go out with him for see if there could be something between them, because she thinks that he's kind, smart, and even very talented in magic, because he can use the same spell as the Pegasi for hours, for at least an entire day without being exhausted. And he said to her that he would like to go out with her. And her friends was more surprised than later on to hear that Shooting Star was not a Pegasi, in fact he was an alicorn. But he showed himself to her old opponents in Ponyville. All of them started to asking questions. Where are you from? Where are you from? How old are you? And are you powerful as Twilight or Celestia? Can you control the moon and the star? Or the sun? Shooting Star was so overwhelmed with all those questions that he always used teleportation spells, or he used a spell that became invisible, so none of the opponents could even see him walking away or even flying away. But after a while, all those questions stopped after he even answered on all of them. But at one time, Shooting Star actually returned back home, his birth town, and Celestia and Luna was correct. There was nothing left, nothing in ruins left. All there was remained of the castle was just a few ruins of walls, and he even asked around the towns or villages around it nearby to see what happened. Well, after the royal family lost their son, they decided that the king should rule the land once more. And after the king had been getting too old, they started to realize maybe this stood as the end of the dynasty, of the family line, and the end of their kingdom. But luckily for them, they had another child, a daughter, but she became the queen, and the line continued for at least another 200 years before some of the opponents there decided to leave, because it has been a dry season. Even the Pegasi and unicorns tried to make the land to be better, but they couldn't even get so much harvest. And they all decided to leave. So Shooting Star decided to remain in Ponyville with Twilight, which a few years later he even proposed to her, which she said yes to. And just barely 2 years after their wedding, they had at least 3 daughters of their own, and all of them became an alicorn, and also as very powerful as their parents are. And even since both Twilight and Shooting Star are immortal, even their daughters also became immortals. And that's how Shooting Star and Twilight found a true love got a big family. The end.